when you actually practice alignment in your business instead of just saying that you do, it can create all kinds of crazy behind the scenes. That's what we're going to talk about in this video. If you watched my earlier video about the freebie that flopped, then you already know I have really strong feelings about offering a huge amount of value for free. Spoiler alert, don't do it. Interestingly, ever since I made that video, that previously free process that is now paid has been flying off the shelves. And that, my friends, is what has created my alignment problem. Not one, not two, but 3 of the people who applied for the client flow map are in the personal transformation space, and all of them use language like manifestation and calling in and attraction. And I realize that I am probably going to piss some of you off, but I think that I have a real responsibility as a former journalist. I have 23 years as a journalist. I got started really young. I know from being trained by some of the biggest media companies in the world, there is no such thing as objectivity. It's a complete illusion. Everybody brings bias to the table. So I think I owe it to you to out my own bias. And that's part of what I'm going to do in this video. So I'm going to share what I think, why I think the way I do, and what it means for your business, no matter where on the spectrum you stand. And by the way, please feel free to disagree with me politely and respectfully, of course. In the comment section, I'm always open to learning. Now, I say this as somebody who has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on both business and personal development. I've built a $2.4 million a year company in the coaching space. So it's not like I'm new to this or that I'm like completely against it. I even wrote this book with this like super cringy look. It's the word manifest. It's right there. So it's not like I'm immune to this. I actually freaking fell down this rabbit hole myself. Okay. So do not buy this book, by the way. It's not a bad book. It's just that I believed everything that I wrote about when I wrote it, but I have changed my mind about lots of it and I would need to completely rewrite it. Please don't buy it. Save your money. Here's what I see. And it's rampant. It's all over the coaching industry. People are selling manifestation while behind the scenes, they're dealing with not enough clients, not enough money, family drama, and all kinds of stuff. They're in the middle of a house fire. You can see the problem, right? If all their tools and manifesting tricks actually worked, why then would that be their reality? I got really, really curious about this disconnect. And here's my working theory. Again, feel free to argue with me in the comments. I think that a lot of folks come from sort of 3 different spaces. Many of us are locked out of legitimacy because of our immigration status, the color of our skin, our gender. For whatever reason, the game is rigged against us. In order to qualify for mainstream credibility, we have to jump through infinitely more hoops than the people who are in the in-group, right? So that can be a kind of hunger for legitimacy that drives this urge to find tools that are more welcoming. So that's one sort of idea that I have. Another thought is that often there is some kind of life upheaval. You have job loss, the loss of a person that you really love. Maybe you have illness, you lose your home, you have a financial devastation, whatever the thing is, and it makes you question your entire operating system. If following the mainstream advice to do everything right and follow all the steps and get the degree and apply for the right job and this and that, if all of that hasn't worked, then maybe swinging all the way to the other side of the pendulum is the answer. So that can be a really powerful driver for why people sort of glom onto the mystical so hard. And then the third theory I have is that when you're burnt out, when you have, again, been a good student, done all the right things, gotten all the A's, played by the rules, exploited yourself in the pursuit of the prize that society has told you to want, and you've realized that it has left you burnt and empty and, void of all the things that make you feel alive, then it can be really difficult to trust your judgment, your desires. And so you want to outsource that power to some kind of guiding force. And that's when, again, mysticism can kind of fill that space. Whether you've been locked out of legitimacy, you've had a life upheaval, or you've burnt out, your traditional tools have basically failed you. So now you go, whoop, you swing all the way to the other side of the pendulum. This is my theory. Again, this is just my theory of why tools like human design, astrology, Akashic records, gene keys, law of attraction, all of these tools are so popular. And you know what I notice also? and you'll tell me again if you see something different, they're extremely popular with women, which is another reason I believe that this is related to deprogramming from patriarchy. It's deprogramming from both capitalism and patriarchy, both of which are very interrelated, very exploitative, very extractive of human well-being to chase something that a very, very tiny minority benefit from. So what do these tools, these mystical tools, give us that mainstream tools don't give us? They give you language and they give you permission to explore internally instead of just being fully dependent on extrinsic validation. So they're finally giving you a lexicon and they're giving you a framework that says, you know what, it's okay to not want to burn yourself out. And it gives you permission to be like that instead of trying to be the thing that is killing you slowly. My take anyway is that if you take all the wrappers off, if you strip all the color off and you just make it all black and white, the thing that's exploiting you is capitalism and the patriarchy and those kinds of systemic ills. And you don't need to know your human design to know that that shit ain't good for most people. That's just my take. Again, argue with me in the comments. This is where I think mystical tools are helpful because they point to truths that are true. There is a kernel of truth in there. You do have permission to explore what you actually want, have permission to operate at a pace that feels actually natural to you. You should have permission to live a life that has meaning and purpose and that isn't just chasing money or status or somebody else's definition of what you're supposed to want. That's all extremely legitimate. But here's what also comes along in that packaging, unfortunately, in this space. There's a lot of grifters that take advantage of people who are in that life collapse kind of upheaval place where people are very vulnerable, and they're most vulnerable to outsourcing agency to a higher power or somebody who seems extremely confident. What tends to happen is when you're that vulnerable, you automatically want to outsource to somebody who doesn't vibe as vulnerable. They vibe as super confident and together, and they have an answer and it's gonna work. And so what happens is the mystical space comes with a lack of accountability because frankly, there's zero fact checking possible, right? There's no agreed upon, like, who am I going to consult if for the Akashic records to double check that what you said is accurate? That's not a thing. You take a tiny truth and then you inflate its significance, which makes people feel certainty at a time when they are deeply uncertain. But that is not actually helpful. That is just an illusion. The cherry picking of data drives me banana pancakes. As a journalist, there are so many cases of gurus and a lot of these like self-help author books where they have such a survivorship bias where they go in and they are the antichrist of the scientific method. The scientific method says you have a hypothesis. If X happens, then Y will happen. This is your hypothesis. And then your entire process is to disprove it. You're supposed to go and try and break the hypothesis with everything you've got. It's only when it doesn't break that you can say, okay, I have proven it. It works. Meanwhile, in the mystical space, you have the exact opposite. They have a hypothesis and then they just ignore all the data that doesn't fit the hypothesis. So you have huge survivorship bias. Somebody says, oh, I manifested this dream home, but then they don't talk about the 800 other things that they tried to manifest that never happened. That's not a reliable tool. 1 in 800, 1 in 8,000, 1 in 8 million. Like, what the hell, man? Where are these stats? Who's tracking them? And where is that source of objective truth? One of the other things about the mystical space or anything in this personal branding world that is also rampant, because if you're a guru, you have to have a personal brand. Your personal brand, by definition, freezes you into an opinion. Basically, you are now stuck forever with whatever opinion made you the most money. And then as additional evidence comes forward, you're going to have to basically, turn a blind eye or bury it because you can't have anything messing with the thing that's generating the money. And that's gross. That's what's ruined this entire space for everybody. Here's the other thing. How the fuck do you teach any of this, right? Like, if you're actually wrapping it in all these mystical, shiny wrappers, then what I see almost everywhere online is I, the guru, can do this thing. You need me, and you'll have to pay me to get this help. But that's not how self-help is supposed to work. Self-help is about agency. It's about You help yourself. In fact, I think that it's extremely toxic to both sides of this equation when the first thing built in the other person isn't agency. And what I mean by agency is the ability to help themselves, power to see that they have some control within all of the uncertainty. When a person has agency, that's when they become a really fun client to work with because they can take responsibility for their actions. They trust themselves to be able to follow through. They trust themselves to be able to know this is right for me and this is not right for me right now. That's when you attract clients that you actually freaking want to work with. But when you use all this griftery language, you attract a bunch of clients who are so lost that they're just like, yes, please save me, mommy. And you don't want those clients because it's not fun to work with them. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So what if the choice wasn't just two things? Either you're super rigid, only proven, fully scientific, vetted, you can only talk about things that are absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt, which is extremely rigid and doesn't leave much room for growth either. Or it's full mystical, full woo, manifest all the things and be grateful. And if you aren't getting your things, then you're not grateful enough. What if there was a third way? Here's my invitation to us all, myself included. Instead of being a guru, instead of being the kind of expert that has it all figured out, what if we approach our work as investigative journalists? And I used to say explorer, but I think investigative journalist says it better. It encapsulates what I was trying to get at better. Here's why. What are the qualities of a good investigative journalist? Number one, they're extremely curious and they're extremely persistent, which means that they notice gaps, they notice contradictions. They are really sensitive to what's being left unsaid. They're really interested in the questions that aren't allowed to be asked. So there's a lot of that, like curiosity and discernment. Persistence means that they don't give up. If a door is slammed in their face the first time they ask a question, they don't just be like, oh, well, guess I won't be asking that question again. No, they will just double down and ask that question even more and come up with truths that not everybody is looking for yet. And that's super valuable. Number two, they have amazing critical thinking and skepticism that they bring to the table. And I know this is so cool in a way because I think a lot of us in the coaching space that have our hearts in the right place and our heads screwed on tight have a huge amount of skepticism in our bodies that we just don't know what the fuck to do with. People are like, oh, that's just the voice of doubt. It's all self-sabotage. And I'm like, no, bullshit. It's actually the best part of you. Give that guy a job. That part of you that's deeply skeptical is actually a huge ally. And here's why. Because when you're skeptical, you're not going to accept information at face value, even if it comes from a credible source. You will question everything. And that is incredibly valuable. You're going to spot inconsistencies. You're going to look for hidden motives. You're going to become such a great student of incentives and therefore the human experience. And that, by the way, also makes you a freaking phenomenal coach because you understand people at a much deeper level. I highly recommend that you lean into that critical thinking and the skepticism because it's extremely valuable. Number three, a good investigative journalist brings strong research and analytical skills. You know that part of you that wants to just lie around all day and read all the books? Well, guess what? That's actually useful. And I don't just say this because of these guys. But seriously, when you have an appetite and curiosity that seems to spread like this, like, if I poured a glass of water on this table, it would just spread outwards. We've been taught to hate that part of ourselves. I actually think that is an incredibly useful part of ourselves because what happens is you end up spotting patterns across large volumes of data. You're connecting dots between different industries, different disciplines, different factions of society that don't usually talk to each other, and you're able to make connections that nobody else is making. That is super valuable. You can connect seemingly unrelated dots, and then you can build a coherent narrative. That brings us to number four, integrity, which is a word that's thrown around the coaching space, but not practiced very much. But when you are an investigative journalist with integrity, you are going to study those incentives. You're going to study human nature. You're going to examine systemic biases, including your own. And this is something that I think is so missed in the coaching space. There's a huge opportunity here for a coach who can come in and say, okay, I can see how this part is the individual's responsibility and this part is the systemic problem that affects this individual in this context. The systemic part of the conversation is almost always left out because, well, the system is really hard to change and the system can't pay us. So we just focus on the individual. And I think that that's not doing the individual true service. And number 5, empathy and moral imagination. Empathy means you care about the impact of your work. You are wanting to do something for both an individual and society as a whole and change the world and make it a better place. And moral imagination is where you're looking at the stories you tell, the content you create, everything that you put out, not as an expose or not as something that is just done to make money, but something that is genuinely of public service. Your marketing content becomes a huge part of your body of work. And so it becomes just as exciting to create that as it is to create paid content of whatever kind you make. So let's wrap up and discuss what all of this has to do with coaching. At this point, almost all of us have kissed so many frogs and have had our hearts broken that there is a huge and growing body of population that is desperate to be served by people who have a clear lens, a more truthful, honest lens, who will call out the hidden incentives, the lies, the buried bullshit, and the truth that's lurking under all of it. People want it. People are hungry for it. So if you're a student of manifestation, if manifestation happens to be a part of your work or any of these other more mystical disciplines like human design or astrology or any of these other things, I highly recommend, one, pick a focus for your experiments. Figure out a lens or a particular problem, a concrete problem that you want to tackle. If you have trouble with this, reach out to me. This is what I help people find. I can look at your entire online presence, like your podcast and your LinkedIn profile and your website and all your offers and so on and so forth, and find the unifying piece that pulls it all together. So if you're not crystal clear on what this is, that's really where to start. Find that first. Now, once you have it, what you want to do is you want to run experiments. You want to test every tool in your arsenal to see what actually leads to results, what breaks down under pressure, what works in one context but doesn't work in another context. I want you to see what lies you fell for personally. I think that's such an interesting place to fall. I fell for this whole manifestation thing at one point, and then I backtracked from it because I realized it was really, really empty and not something that I personally found reliable or that I could count on or recreate on demand. Look at where some of these things have broken your own heart, but don't look with judgment, look with curiosity, and then follow the incentives. Why did you fall for it? That will lead you to why other people fall for it, and then you'll be able to devise a more truthful, more honest, and more effective solution. And finally, what works better? Like, what are the tools that you keep reaching for because they just freaking work? They may not have names yet. You may have to assign them names. They may be variations of things that you've learned from other people. That's your body of work. That's what people are going to pay you for. A final thing I'll say is that what I love about the investigative journalist lens is that if you've ever hung out with an investigative journalist, and I have plenty, I will tell you this, they are not blind beginners. They are sophisticated, interesting players that can be trusted to ferret out the truth buried under the bullshit. Everybody needs one of those people in their lives. That is a really powerful ally to have in your corner when you're going through a deep transformation. If you want a private custom audit for where the breaks and leaks lie in your own narrative online, you can apply for a client flow map. And if you want to just join my newsletter or be served more videos like this that actually take you behind the scenes of things that we're all dealing with but don't know what to do about, then make sure you hit subscribe, hit like, and argue with me in the comments. Politely, of course. I'll see you in the next video.